Welcome to another video on the channel. I bet everyone here has watched the movie The Blair Witch Project, right? Well, did you also feel distressed when you watched it? I'm going to tell you the true story that inspired the film. Did the Blair Witch really exist? But before we continue, I'd like to thank you all for your support. We've reached 10 subscribers on the channel. Thank you very much, everyone. And as usual, if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Your support is very important to us. Thanks, and let's get to the video. It was the year 1997 when Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick sent 3 actors to make an improvised film in a forest. At that time, the idea of how the film would be made was unprecedented. With a budget of around $60,000, the film told the story of 3 young people who go to a forest to shoot a documentary about the legend of the Blair Witch. The script had been written in 1993, when Sanchez and Myrick were still in college, to make the story even more realistic. The script featured improvised dialogues so that the actors could make things even more real. The film had a major difference. They didn't use special effects to scare the audience as we usually see in successful horror films. In fact, the reactions were real because the cast didn't know what they would find in the forest. But what about this legend of the Blair Witch? Did they just invent it? Or did she really exist? Incredibly, there is the story of a woman who was accused of being the witch, and it was based on this case that the idea of filming the movie arose. The story that inspired the film began a long time ago, exactly in the year 1771, in Blair, as the town was called by the small municipality, or rather a small village, with only 2 streets and about a dozen of houses. The town was growing, its inhabitants lived happily even though they had a quiet life. At the end of the year 1785, a woman named Ellie Kedward received very serious accusations. After some events, according to some children in the region, Ellie would take them home to draw their blood. What did she do with the children's blood? No one knows. In those times, you must know how witches were treated, right? Well, whenever someone was accused of witchcraft, they were either burned alive at the stake, excommunicated by the church, or simply expelled from the town. In the middle of that winter, the inhabitants of the town of Blair decided to take action against Ellie. She was accused of witchcraft and ended up being expelled from the small village. She was taken to a forest and left to her own fate. Besides having to face the extreme cold, Ellie had to deal with the obstacles of the forest. Many say she froze in the forest because of the cold and ended up dying. Others say she simply disappeared, but the most acceptable hypothesis was that she fell into a lake while walking at night in the forest and drowned. With that, the town finally got rid of the witch and everyone lived in peace. Right? Wrong. In fact, the inhabitants of Blair lived in peace for about a year until the macabre things started happening in the winter of 1786. All those people who accused her of being a witch simply disappeared without a trace. It was strange because the supposed witch was already dead. So who made all those people disappear so mysteriously? The disappearances remained unsolved and, as a consequence, the other inhabitants of Blair swore never to speak the name of Ellie again and abandoned the town. For some reason, the disappearances simply stopped. The inhabitants of Blair didn't know why, but they were relieved that everything had returned to normal. Years passed. The turn of the 18th to the 19th century came, and in 1809, a strange book appeared in the small forest. The book, which was quite degraded, was titled The Cult of the Blair Witch. It is considered fiction. The work told the story of an entire cursed town by a witch. Does that remind you of something? The story of the book was very similar to the story of the town, but everyone thought it was pure coincidence. At the end of the book, the witch is hunted down and burned alive. After many years, more than 40 to be more exact, the town of Blair, which had been abandoned, was inhabited again in 1820. A man named Rebu Katz decided to buy those lands that were supposedly cursed. In a short time, he built buildings, houses, and renovated buildings that were in ruins. In 1824, he gave another name to the town, Burkittsville. This town still exists today and is often visited by tourists who are attracted by the legend of the Blair Witch. Shortly after the lands were inhabited again, the legend of the Blair Witch resurfaced. In August 1825, a 10-year-old girl drowned in a local stream. Her death seemed not to have been accidental. 11 people said they saw the pale hand of a woman pulling the girl to the bottom of the stream. After the mysterious drowning, the stream was filled with logs and branches that hindered the search. The girl's body was never found. With this event, people relived the legend of the Blair Witch once again, but as the years passed, fewer events related to the witch, and the legend were forgotten again. Until, after many decades without any deaths or disappearances, Robin Weaver, only 8 years old, went missing in 1947. People formed several search teams to look for the girl in the forest, but without success. As night fell, Robin's family became increasingly worried about the girl. 5 men then joined forces and decided to search the forest at night. After a day, neither the girl nor the 5 men had returned. The other people in town thought the men might have gotten lost, just like the girl, and another group was formed to search. After a few hours of searching, the men were finally found, but they were all dead. Their bodies had been ripped apart and their entrails scattered in the forest. The men's hands were tied, their faces were marked, and all of it seemed to be the work of the famous witch. After this event, no one dared to enter the Blair Witch forest again. Once again, the event simply stopped. For many years, despite the death of the 5 men, the lack of events related to the legend caused it to be forgotten again. Until around 1913, a little boy named Rustin Par moved to Burkittsville. According to investigations in the region between 1925 and 1930, Rustin Par moved to the dreaded forest. He decided he wanted to have a house in the middle of the mountains, about 4 hours from town. Rustin Par was already a man, around 20 years old, and he intended to leave his uncle's house where he lived. After 5 years of building his wooden house, it was finally ready. Rustin Par started living completely isolated. He was seen wandering through the forest with his pipe in his mouth, often talking to himself. He went to town about twice a year just to get the necessary food to survive. But by the late 1940s, Burkittsville was again the scene of more murders. This time, 8 children disappeared without a trace. After much investigation and searching, 7 bodies of the 8 missing children were found in the basement of Rustin Par's house. The bodies had been ripped apart and marked with ritualistic signs. The children's bodies were only found because Kyle Brody, one of the missing children, managed to escape from Rustin's house and alert the authorities about the incident. Kyle reported that he was forced to witness the murder of all those children and that Rustin spoke to himself while committing the crimes, seeming to be talking to a woman. He confessed to all 7 murders and said he did it because he was ordered by the ghost of an old woman. He was arrested, tried and sentenced to hang, being executed on November 22, 1941. Would this finally be the end of the Blair Witch mystery? No, not yet. Kyle Brody, the only child who survived Rustin's attacks, would still suffer the consequences of the Blair Witch's curse. In 1947, Kyle was arrested in Baltimore for vagrancy. Since his family refused to pay bail, he remained in custody. A few years later, Kyle attempted suicide, which landed him in a sanatorium in Reston Hills, Georgia. From there on, he was tossed from asylum to asylum, always causing trouble with his fits of rage and delusions. Kyle's life went on like this until 1961, when he slashed his wrists and took his own life. Many people theorize that Kyle Brody was the last person to be cursed by the Blair Witch, and that after that, there were never again cases of people dying mysteriously in the region. It was from this story that the movie The Blair Witch Project was made. There are theories that all this story was created by the authors of the film as a marketing ploy to give more hype. Whether it's legend or not, maybe we'll never find out. It may be that all this really happened, or that there was a case of mass hysteria creating the legend of the Blair Witch. In doubt, I prefer to believe that the witch really exists, but that her curse has come to an end. I'll say goodbye here until next time.